Canadian crude oil prices hit a record low today of less than $14 a barrel. One of this country's biggest oil producers thinks the answer is government-imposed production cuts. But is it possible to get all oil companies on board, and how much of a difference could it actually make? Tim McMillan is the president and CEO of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Thanks so much for being with us, Mr. McMillan. Great to see you. I want to start off by asking you how you think this, what is prompting this kind of a call?
It's a crisis, nothing short of that. For global energy prices to be fairly stable, but Canada to get crushed, it's because we don't have enough market access, and our one customer has had a hiccup with a few refineries. So it's a crisis, and people are looking for solutions.
What do you think of this as a potential solution? How effective or not effective could it be?
I think it's remarkable that we're at a state where we're considering production cuts, but the reality is we're already seeing them. Individual companies are looking at their production today. Many of them are losing money on every barrel they're producing. So it's happening already. As far as where the government steps in, I would leave that to the government to decide what's appropriate for them to act on.
What's your take, though, on the idea that the government could, that's something we saw happen in, I think, 1980 or the early 1980s. Do you think government intervention is the right way to go?
Well, I think that what we would say is that getting access to markets is the right way to go, and that it's government actions that have largely got us into this position. That Northern Gateway should have been in production today, and if that were the case, we wouldn't have a discount from WTI. In fact, we might even be getting a premium to it.
But there are, in the case of Northern Gateway, for example, in the case of some other pipelines, there are legitimate concerns that were expressed and then taken into account. I know the government this current government wasn't a proponent of Northern Gateway. They are a proponent of TMX, and even in being so, they've had to buy it to even try and see it get built.
Yeah, no, that's true that on TMX they've purchased the pipeline. The court has then stalled it again with NEB needing to redo a portion and the government needing to redo a portion of its consultation. But Northern Gateway was cancelled after the last election when the government campaigned on killing the project. And that project was at the same point, it had its approval from the federal government, and the federal government needed to redo one portion of the consultation, and they chose not to do it. I think the crisis we're in today should lead the government to reinvigorate that project and potentially Energy East as well, so that Canada can define its own destiny with its resources as opposed to always relying on the United States.
Do you have any optimism that they'll do that? And I ask because the amount of opposition, even to TMX, which they did, which as we've said, they did approve, seems almost never ending.
The majority of Canadians support TMX. If you do a poll, then a majority of British Columbians support it.
Vocal opposition,
but in Canada,
I should say.
We have certainly been, very vocal and well-funded, and much of it coming out of U.S. foundations. And I think it's time for Canada to mature to a point where we recognize that good, high-quality projects that Canada puts forward and meets our high regulatory standards are important. We built railroads, we built pipelines and power lines safely and responsibly for generations, and today we need to continue on that heritage.
Do you think that a pipeline is the magic bullet? And I ask because there are other factors that go into obviously determining the price and the discount actually that Canadian crude is taking right now. Is it a magic bullet?
I think that in the short term, rail is going to have to play an important part, but having an efficient transportation system, which would have pipelines going to both our coasts as well as continuing to grow them to the U.S., would allow us to get global prices. And Brent is trading at higher prices than West Texas Intermediate. And if we had Northern Gateway and Trans Mountain, we would be getting higher prices than WTI many days.
And just one last question on the proposal put forward around government intervention. Suncor has responded and said that would send the wrong message to the investment community. What do you think of that?
I think that the investment community has got the message from Canada that we haven't been a place for investment for several years now, as we're cancelling projects after they've been approved. Whether the provincial government would want to take that step or not, I think would have potential effects, but I would leave it to the provincial government to decide what serves their interests best.
We'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much, Mr. McMillan. Nice to see you.
Thanks.